we have all this information now that we've gathered. I think we're to the point now where we're ready to begin contacting potential suppliers. Where do we move from there, and how do we do that?
Yeah, I think there's, not to oversimplify a complicated process, but I think there's two schools of thought that one can consider. The first is to take an honest assessment in terms of what you, your team, your colleagues bring to the table in terms of understanding what are the different market alternatives that exist. Do you really know, all the different players, both the larger ones, maybe some of the smaller, more nimble players that are coming up that are doing something really innovative, but you haven't even had a chance to dig into that and take a look. So if you think you really know the space, then you can probably move right into a standard request for proposal process. But if you don't, or even if you do, but just want to make sure you're not inadvertently omitting something, maybe you just want to start doing a market assessment and really just send out a request for information, start talking to vendors, just having informal conversations to find out what's going on. Talk to friends, colleagues, people at other organizations. What are they thinking, or what have they done? And just collecting more information to round out your own thinking and to give yourself a more comfortable underpinning in terms of, okay, we're about to embark on this. We've actually made sure that we haven't inadvertently overlooked something that actually might be beneficial to our organization.
Exactly, and I don't want to go out here promoting all of our consultants that are friends of ours, but this certainly seems like an area where if you're not that familiar with the technologies that are out there, if you reach out to your network and don't get all the questions that you have answered, this seems like a great area where it would be beneficial to reach out to somebody who knows the technologies better than you do and who can help you to help guide you to the right solutions.
Absolutely. The networks that I'm sure hopefully we all enjoy and have the privilege of taking advantage of are sometimes our most powerful assets, and absolutely would take every opportunity to leverage them for the high level beginning exercise, and even for some of the more substantive nuanced questions, because there's probably a lot of experience out there that can be tapped into.
And I think this brings us to a part of the discussion that when we originally talked about this a while back, this was one of my favorite parts of the whole process, and that is bringing in the vendors and then the dynamics of that whole interface, because you had so many great insights into those meetings and what you should be looking for and who you're dealing with and how you should present the questions and all of that. So let's go ahead and talk about that for a while. And I think we're talking about the actual proposal defense meeting here. Is that correct?
Yeah, if that's what you're referring to, yes.
Yes. So who should attend? What should you stress to your team before the meetings? And what advice do you have for assessing the folks that you will be meeting with? This is a broad topic, but what kind of insights do you have there?
Yeah, so in my opinion, you've gone through at this point, in terms of what I would think of as the typical process steps, and you now have received proposals that that could be very detailed in terms of describing, or at least the vendors that you're reaching out to, describing what their capabilities are, what are the pros of their product compared to others, what's on their roadmap. Now you want to come in and really test that, both your understanding as well as other assumptions, and have other questions addressed. And I think a very effective way to do that is have face-to-face meetings. And so all the people on that on that selection team and implementation team should be welcomed. And then you also want to make sure that the person or the team that you're interviewing, they bring their key people. Who's going to be the project manager, project director? Who are the key lieutenants that they're going to have with them? And you really want them to all be there in the room with you. Now, what I think you're referring to when we spoke was that there's little strategies that I think, I have sort of woven into my operating model, and others may have done even more creative things. But what I find sometimes is that I get a little bit wary, maybe that's a better way to put it, of highly polished presentations.
Right.
Where you don't have a lot of interaction. So what I encourage, in fact, what I try to do is, ask vendors, and they should be treated with absolute, level of respect. They're doing a lot of work to put these together. But say to them, look, we want to limit the polished or the canned presentation to some amount of time. and then have the privilege of basically maybe splitting the team up so that there's not one person dominating the question, particularly if that person's not going to be one, is one of the key people, and they're not, verbalizing too much during the meeting. But you want to get a chance to talk to them one-on-one. You want to talk to some of their peers. You want to test if the people that are purported to be the subject matter experts really do know what they're talking about, rather than just, anointing themselves with the title. So all of these things, I think, are important, and you want to also be, listen attentively, because if you start getting answers that just don't make sense, that's a real alarm bell that should be going off to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe things aren't quite as what they say they will be. Or if they're too agreeable, that you come up with an idea, they say, yeah, that we can do that, or it's on our roadmap. I mean, these are all little tells that should sort of give you pause. Now, that doesn't mean that if a person says, hey, we can't do something, that's a problem. I mean, sometimes that's refreshing to get that kind of honest, open answer. And if you get that answer both in a group setting as well as, confirming this, if you break up into smaller groups with, break up their delivery team or their, proposal team, these are ways to verify what was said during the meeting or what was, shared in a proposal. You're really getting the honest assessment of what's going on. So little tricks, little tools, common sense. But these are just things that I know that you and I had spoken about that you thought may be helpful to this discussing today.